Now on Mississippi Insight, November 26th is another election day, this one featuring a runoff for a state Supreme Court seat. We'll talk with incumbent Justice Jim Kitchens and his challenger, State Senator Jenifer Branning. Also bracing for the crackdown, immigrants in Mississippi consider how the second Trump presidency will impact them. That's all ahead this week on Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thanks for joining us for this November 23rd edition of Insight. Most voters in our viewing area have another election day in front of them. Two runoff elections are set for Tuesday, November 26th. One will decide who will serve on the Mississippi Court of Appeals for District 5 in South Mississippi. And then there is the race for the state Supreme Court's 1st District seat. Presiding Justice Jim Kitchens faces a strong challenge by State Senator Jenifer Branning. She led a 5-candidate field on November 5th, drawing 42% of the vote. Kitchens came in second with 36% of the vote. We are going to hear from Kitchens later in the program. First, we are joined by Jenifer Branning. She is a Republican currently serving her 3rd term as senator, representing citizens in Leake, Neshoba, and Winston counties. Senator Branning, welcome to Mississippi Insight.
Thank you for having me.
First, what makes a 3rd-term state senator want to make a run for the Mississippi Supreme Court?
Well, the same reason that I began serving the people of District 18 in the Mississippi Senate. I truly want to do my part to make Mississippi the best place to live, work, and raise a family.
What makes you qualified for this job in the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm the only candidate that has both legal experience, including trial court experience in all the trial courts in Mississippi, as well as legislative experience. So I've been a legislator for almost a decade now.
You focus your pitch to voters, what you call Christian and conservative values. How would those values influence your work on the Supreme Court?
Certainly, I'm running as a constitutional conservative, and when I say that, what I mean is, you know, Mississippians need and deserve justices that will follow the law just like it's written, not adding to and not taking away. So that's what I mean when I say constitutional conservative.
You have been running against an incumbent who has been serving on the court for 16 years. Why do you believe you are a better candidate than Justice Kitchens?
Again, I believe it goes back to the fact that I have both legal and legislative experience, and this is an 8-year term of office. I'm confident I've got the experience, the energy, and the work ethic to serve Mississippians well on the Mississippi Supreme Court.
What do you want to see changed on the court if you become the winner there?
What I want to do for Mississippians on the court is simply follow the law just like it's written. That's what Mississippians need and deserve on the court.
When you say follow the law, give me an example of that.
Well, without a certain outcome in mind. When a case comes up before the court, the law should be considered and looked at and followed, simply followed, without any intended outcome. And that's what I'm running to do for the people of Mississippi.
What is the court not doing that right now that you see needs to change?
Well, the way I would like to answer that, there are 5 people in the race in the beginning for the Mississippi Supreme Court. So that tells me that people want to change on the court. And people are getting a hold of the idea of a new generation of constitutional conservative leadership on the Mississippi Supreme Court. You and your Republican supporters are portraying Jim Kitchens as a liberal. What evidence do you have to support that he's a liberal justice? I don't have any comment with regard to having called Justice Kitchens a liberal justice. Those certainly are not my words. What I've tried to do in this race is focus and tell people why I'm qualified and why I would like to serve them on the Supreme Court. And that's because I'm a constitutional conservative, and that's what Mississippians need and deserve on the court. Do you believe he's a liberal justice? I believe Justice Kitchens has served the people of Mississippi well, but I do believe that Mississippians are ready for a change on the court. In terms of the court itself, what do you see in the court for the next term, the next 8 years moving forward? Certainly, there are all types of decisions that will come up before the court, and those decisions will affect the homes, the lives, and the pocketbooks of all Mississippians. So it's vitally important that we have justices just willing to follow the law. That's what the role of the court is. In this country, with the polarization of the country, there's been a lot of people who don't trust the judicial system. How do you believe that Mississippians look at our court system? Well, I would hope that Mississippians understand that the court system is a very vital part of our state government. And in order for it to operate efficiently and effectively, it needs to stay in its lane, so to speak, and that's just to follow the law, calling balls and strikes from the bench, not legislating from the bench. As a legislator for almost a decade, I know what that means, and that does not belong in the Mississippi Supreme Court. Do you believe that the voters and people have more faith in the system here, at least in the state of Mississippi, than they do across the country? I do believe that, but I believe they want to ensure the integrity of the system remains intact. And so when I talk to voters about being a constitutional conservative, about not legislating from the bench, they all want that. Mississippians need and deserve that. What examples do you have of legislating from the bench that you might want to see change or that we're doing right now? Well, I just think it's important that we make sure that's not happening in Mississippi. Certainly you can think of examples across the nation where that has happened, and we certainly do not want that in Mississippi.
What examples would you would not want to see?
Well, it's not proper for me to talk about certain cases before the court, either now or in the future, but overall, I think the theme is that we want to make sure there's no legislating from the bench, and that's very important in Mississippi.
What about voter turnout? This is coming on a Tuesday right before Thanksgiving. Are you concerned about people not showing up to the polls on Tuesday?
Certainly. We're always concerned about turnout in any election, and especially a runoff the week of Thanksgiving. So we're doing our part to get the message out to Mississippians that this is important. We need everyone to turn out and cast their vote in this very important election for Mississippi.
What do you want to get people out to the polls early, or whatever they can do to get to the polls on the holiday week?
Certainly, we're educating people that absentee voting is available from now through noon on this Saturday prior to the election, or on Election Day, which is the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, the 26th. So we encourage everyone to get out and cast their vote.
Do you believe, how are you feeling going into this election come Tuesday? How are you feeling right now?
We're overwhelmed by support, having led the ticket at 42% in a 5-way race against a 2-term incumbent. We think that speaks highly of the fact that people are ready for a change. But we also know that we've got to get the people to turn back out in the runoff. So we're continuing to work until the polls close on the 26th.
Yeah, funding-wise, you outraised all of your opponents. Do you believe you have the edge because of funding?
Well, certainly it's encouraging to see the amount of support that we have garnered across all of Mississippi. But we're still continuing to work hard. I love seeing voters one-on-one. We have a very extensive grassroots campaign, and we'll continue to do that until the polls close on Tuesday.
Yeah, how much funding do you have, and how much have you contributed to your campaign going into this the final election here?
I've contributed a significant amount to the campaign because I believe it's the right thing to do for Mississippi.
You think you're going to have a large turnout come this runoff election compared to past runoffs, or what are you looking at?
We certainly hope so. We're working very hard to get the message out to Mississippians to get back to the polls.
What's your final message to Mississippians come Tuesday? What do you want to say to them?
Certainly, I believe and I'm confident that I've got the experience, the energy, and the work ethic to serve the Mississippians well on the Mississippi Supreme Court. So I'm just asking for everyone's vote and support.
Jenifer Branning, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, and we'll be right back. Justice Gibson, you're running for a third 8-year term on the Supreme Court. Why are you running for a third term?
Because I know I'm doing a good job there, and I want to keep doing it. I love serving the people of Mississippi. I know what I'm doing, and I think I'm doing a lot of good. Remind voters what a Supreme Court justice does on a daily basis. What is the job of the Supreme Court justice? Well, we don't ever have trials. People think that we have trials, that we sentence people and all that kind of thing. None of that happens at the Supreme Court. Every case we have has come from some other court. It's been tried somewhere in the state of Mississippi, and someone has appealed it. Someone lost at the lower court, and they appealed it up to the Supreme Court, which is the only place they can appeal from the trial courts of Mississippi. And so on a daily basis, those are the cases you're listening to, other cases that have been appealed and that you guys are kind of relitigating in a sense? Well, we're not necessarily listening to them, because the first thing that happens is they have to file a rather complex written brief. And there's nothing brief about a brief. They're typically about 50 pages long. We study those, and it's astonishing how few times the lawyers actually request oral argument. But we don't really have that many oral arguments. We seldom see the lawyers or the parties in the cases. When you talk about the high court, what are some of the benchmark cases that you've come before the court that you've had to deal with? Well, I really am not supposed to talk about our cases, but I will just mention a couple. One that really stands out in my mind a lot is the Haley Barber pardons case. Right at the end of Governor Barber's term, he pardoned a lot of people, and the Attorney General, Jim Hood, at that time took umbrage with that. And we had quite a heated argument up there about that. The only question was not whether it was a good idea, but did the governor have the constitutional authority to do that? And we held that he did. It's pretty clear in the Constitution. Well, actually, voters believe that you are the most qualified to serve in this position right now. Well, I will tell you a little bit about my experience. I have been in the courts of Mississippi most of my life. I tried cases when I was quite young. When I got out of law school, I was appointed on a lot of criminal cases. I had tried 2 capital murder cases to verdict before I was 25 years old, and I won both of them. And I never stopped trying cases after that until I got on the Supreme Court. During that time, I was district attorney, was elected 3 times down in Copiah, Lincoln, Pike, and Walthall counties. And when I left that office, I went back into private practice. I've actually been in the private sector more than I have the public sector. I was in the private practice of law for about 30 years before I got talked into running for the Supreme Court, and I first was elected in 2008.
You're facing a tough challenge from State Senator Jenifer Branning. She, in fact, drew more votes than you in the general election. How do you turn those numbers around come Tuesday in this runoff?
Well, there were 3 other candidates in the race at the time of the November 5th election. I hope that those voters will consider me. I think that many of them will. It's just a question of which one of us, I or Senator Branning, can get the most of those votes and get our own voters back to the polls.
Branning and her Republican supporters have tried to portray you as a liberal judge. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's hard to know how to respond to that because I have not set out to be a liberal judge or a conservative judge or anything but a judge that follows the law. And that's what I've done. No agency or entity that rates judges has rated me liberal. That's Senator Branning's description of me, and if she wants to say that, okay, but I really don't know where that's coming from.
Why should voters take the Supreme Court? And this isn't like a governor's race or something when it comes to large voter turnout. What is it that people should look at when it comes to the Supreme Court? Why should they pay attention to this race?
Well, it's important to people, and most folks really don't think about the Supreme Court very often, but it affects every person in this state. Every case, as I said, that comes to us has already been tried somewhere. And when we review those cases and we interpret them and we write opinions as to what the controlling law is in those cases, that becomes binding upon all the courts throughout the state. We're elected from districts, but once we are there, we serve the whole state. So I may be dealing, I'm going back to the courthouse this afternoon. When I get over there, I may be dealing with something from Gulfport, and then before the day's over, something from Corinth or Hernando, because we have cases from everywhere in Mississippi, all 82 counties. And when we decide those cases, we are the court of last resort in the state. And so our decisions establish the rule of law in Mississippi, and everybody is subject to that once it's established by the Supreme Court.
Are you concerned about voter turnout next week, Tuesday, a few days before Thanksgiving?
You better believe I am. Turnout is what it's all about. And I urge people to vote. I always have. And even when I wasn't in the election, people should vote. It's an American privilege. Mississippi, of all places, where people have bled and died so everybody would have a right to vote. We dishonor the people who established and achieved all that if we don't go and vote.
In terms of the court itself, what do you want to see the court and your fellow justices do in the upcoming court that they haven't already been doing?
Well, I want to keep doing what I have been doing. I think I'm doing it right. Nobody has said Jim Kitchens isn't doing a good job at the court. Nobody said I've done anything wrong. Nobody has suggested I change anything that I'm doing. I try to follow the law, and I do follow the law. I'm pretty well acquainted with the law. And I just, along that line, I'd like to say that I do not attack my opponents. I don't criticize them personally. I think Senator Branning seems to be a very nice person. She has a beautiful family, and I have no quarrel with her on a personal level. But on a professional level, I will observe that Senator Branning, as best I have been able to determine, has never tried a case in a circuit court, never had a jury trial. And the Supreme Court gets between 70 and 80% of the appeals that we handle from the circuit courts. Furthermore, she's asking the people to let her serve on the highest court in the state. Yet I can't find that she has ever prosecuted an appeal to the Mississippi Supreme Court. She wants to come and work at a place where she has not practiced as an attorney. Now, she has a law practice. She has a law degree from a very fine law school, Mississippi College. But in the 20 years she's been an attorney, she has not been a litigator. And we wouldn't need a Supreme Court if it were not for litigation. Nobody would ever lose a case. So I think that my experience compared to hers is just incomparable.
And our political climate today, there's been a lot of talk about the faith and the trust in our judicial system. Do you think Mississippians, trust our judicial system and our courts today?
That is a legitimate concern. People need to be concerned about that. I'm glad that they are, because if people lose confidence in our courts, then we are doomed as a democratic society. People are questioning the integrity now of the U.S. Supreme Court. And I hope and pray that can get straightened out. That is a dangerous thing. But the Mississippi Supreme Court, as far as I know, is respected by the public, and I'd like to keep it that way.
And so for the next 8 years, if you get reelected, what do you see over the next 8 years?
More of the same.
More of the same.
More of the same.
And come Tuesday, what kind of turnout would you like to see?
I would like to see the biggest turnout in history on Tuesday, the 26th. That's just a few days away. And by the way, if you're not going to be in town, if you're going to be traveling for Thanksgiving, that is a very bad time for an election, but the cards fell that way, and that's when it is. But you can vote absentee at your county courthouse now. You can go there the rest of the day today until 5 o'clock. This is Thursday, and then on Friday, all day long on Friday from 8 to 5 at your courthouse, and then on Saturday morning from 8 until noon.
How are you feeling going into this runoff right now?
I feel great. I'm blessed with very good health. My mom retired at age 99 as a piano teacher. She had to retire because she couldn't see, and I think 99 is about right.
All right, Justice Kitchens, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
All right, and we'll be right back. Donald Trump won election to the second term in the White House this month in large part due to his pledge to crack down on undocumented immigrants. He has promised to deport millions of people and roll back policies restricting immigration from certain countries. He has even promised ending automatic citizenship for children born to non-citizens in the U.S. I spoke with Lorena Quiroz, who with the Immigrant Alliance and Justice for Equity of Mississippi. She says many Mississippians may not appreciate the impact that a mass crackdown could have on the state economy.
The immediate reaction to the elections for the community which I served was a lot of hurt, a lot of confusion, especially around friends, perceived allies that voted for a person that would want them deported. So it wasn't really a Republican versus Democratic. When we began those conversations, it was like, we're voting for mass deportation of our families, our friends, our mothers, our aunts. And so there was a lot of hurt. My staff had we had a debrief, a lot of tears shed. And because we hired people of all views, there were people that actually voted for the new president, and they were shocked at the reaction. So there seemed to be it's like a cognitive dissonance that occurs in our communities where they didn't think like how this would affect, the minutia of the choices. Like, yes, my colleague's aunt could be deported. My best friend's husband could be deported. So a lot of tension, a lot of confusion. And, we're left here trying to figure out what our next steps are. During COVID, you had poultry plants almost ceasing production because they didn't have people to work those plants. So we had just gotten over the raids. People weren't hired. People were afraid to come back. And then all of a sudden, we're essential workers. And they're coming into our communities. So the poultry plant, the meat processing industry would definitely suffer. The field, blueberries, sweet potatoes in North Mississippi, the factories. Who is going to be able to work those long hours? Because these folks that are coming in, they're not only working to be able to create a better lives for themselves, for their families, but 9 out of 10, they're taking the families back home of their mom, their dad. Their mom might be suffering from some kind of physical ailment, or they may be taking care of some younger children. So your workforce would be just completely eradicated, I would say. So it would have a devastating impact on the economic, on the output. And then Mississippi is a state that's losing folks. Like, we need people, we need to retain people that actually love and appreciate the state.
If you have comments or questions about today's show or suggestions for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@wjtv.com. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.